Assalamualaikum and a very good day everyone. My name is Amani binti Ibrahim. I'm an occupational therapist in Autism Gym Center and today I'll be presenting about motor learning in children. Now going on to our topic which is motor learning. So what is motor learning? So motor learning refers to the acquisition or modification of motor skill. So it basically means how a child learns to gain their movement or motor skills. In motor learning, it comprises or it's exposed on a lot of technique and concept such as transfer of learning, sequencing and adapting tasks, type and amount of practice, error-based learning, timing and type of feedback, and also mental rehearsal. So this technique or this concept provide useful information for the therapists and also for parents on how or on the technique that involve that they can use and involve in their teaching learning process of the movement of the children itself. And motor learning also enables therapists to incorporate motor learning principle into learning so that children learn and retain motor function for their daily life activity. Now going on to the first concept under motor learning, which is transfer of learning. So transfer of learning, also known as generalization, it refers to applying learning to new situation. So the goal of the intervention itself is that the child able to transfer learning performed in the intervention setting. For example, they learn in a clinic, in a hospital, or in a center into their natural context. So for example, if a child have a motor problem, so he or she have been working on using a crutches or wheelchair, as a therapist, we hope that the child will be able to maneuver his wheelchair or use his crutches on his natural context, on the place that he usually go to, like in his home or in his school and etc. So, in motor learning, in transfer of learning in particular, the child are best able to transfer motor skills when they have practiced the motor skills within the natural context or you can say in their real world situation. Therefore, the best way to help the child to be successful is by practicing the skill in their own environment. And transfer of learning also occur more easily when the motor task is performed during a functional activity or in an actual occupation that are scheduled as at its natural time and place and in the real context. So apart from that, motor skills with a similar concept or similar components are also more likely to transfer compared to one who have a different type of skill needed. So, for example, if a child who has just successfully learned how to throw a ball, then they might also have the skill to throw beanbags at target because they already acquired the skill of throwing. Now going on to the second concept under motor learning, which is sequencing and adapting tasks. So as we all know, in learning new skills, it's always easier to learn it bit by bit and also step by step in gradual instead of learning it as a whole concept as it might be overwhelming for some. So spreading and adapting motor tasks so that children are successful is constitute a part of the therapy process itself. So here are some tips or information that can be helpful for parents and also for therapists to help in aiding in motor learning of the children. So the first one is discrete tasks are easier to accomplish compared to continuous tasks. So as we all know, when we have a complex movement or complex activity to do, it's easier for us to break down or to broken down the task step by step instead of giving a whole chunk, a whole complex idea of whole complex movement for the child to learn, as it might be too complex for them to understand, and also they might be overwhelmed from the hard task itself. So it's better for us as therapists of parent in teaching them to learn new skills, especially motor skills, by breaking down the task itself into a smaller parts instead of giving them a whole chunks. And the second one is tasks involving unimanual movement, or example using one hand, are often learned or mastered before bimanual movement or using both hands, also known as bilateral movement. So when teaching a new skill, a new movement, a new motor performance to a child, it's better for us therapists and also better for parents to teach them gradually, starting from the easier part and then slowly, gradually increase it into a harder part. So, for example, for this one, say using one hand is definitely more easier compared to using both hands. So, parent, if you have any task that needed a child to use both hands, you can start off practicing with your child by using one hand first, then gradually move into two hand if the movement of technique or the skills needed are using hand. The same goes to leg and so on. And then the third one is skills manipulating stationary object developed before skills with moving object. And fourth one is closed tasks or tasks performed in stationary environment are simpler for most children to accomplish compared to open tasks or tasks performed in an environment that is changing or in motion. So why is this happening? Because when child are learning a new skills, a new performance, they might be overwhelmed when we keep on changing the environment, we keep on changing the things that are used, as they need to learn the skills slowly to gain and to master the skills. So changing the environment or changing the things that are used uh, frequently are not helping them in gaining and also achieving and also mastering the skills that they are currently working on. So next for the fifth point, say that simple motor tasks with fewer cognitive requirement, less precision, less direction, and less steps are accomplished more readily than those with more cognitive requirement, higher precision, and more direction with multiple steps. So for example here, if we give coloring or writing activity for children, it is easier for them to just start the skill by practicing to scribble first instead of straight away ask them to color within line or within given shapes. So start slow, go step by step, and make sure that the task is not too hard or not too complex for children to follow at first. And then the last one is that the structure of the environment also plays an important role in the nature and complexity of the demand of the activity. So, for example, environment with a variability and extraneous stimuli, for example, the presence of other children, so are more challenging, and that's more difficult for children to learn a new skills and to adapt to new skill, as they must continually adapt and adjust to new stimuli around them. So it's better for them to learn the skill first in environment they are comfortable of instead of mixing them with everyone and changing the environment continuously. Next, we're going to see the third concept of techniques that can be used by therapists and parents in motor learning, which is practice level and also type. So under practice level and types, it's divided into four types of practice, which is the first one is mass practice, or also known as block. The second one is distributed practice. Third one is variable and random practice, and fourth one is mental practice. So we'll be going to go through these practice level and types one by one. So going on, the first one is math practice, also known as a block. So math practice, in which the practice is done in the period performing the movement, is greater than the rest period. So this type of practice works best during cognitive stage, as the subject is just beginning to learn the movement or new skills. So in math practice, for example, um, we may include a working on grabs pattern, for example, and release by asking a child to pick up 10 blocks and put them all in a container or in cups and taking a break and then repeating the game again. So this is example of activity that using math practice means you do the activity, you take a rest for a while, and you keep repeating the activity you have done before. So this is type of math practice. Next one, the second type of practice is distributed practice. So distributed practice is practice in which a rest during trial is greater than the time of trial and is most useful during the associative stage. So for example of distributed practice, a therapist or parents can ask a child to pick up a bean bags and also put it in place it on the floor. So while engaging in a game of swinging, so in this scenario, the child still practicing grab and release pattern, but the child is also working on his postural control by being on the swing, and also at the same time he or she is still processing the vestibular input that he get. So therefore, the child that grabs and releases a few beanbags has a rest while swinging, in which he must work on other aspects of skills and then return to grabs and release. Now going on to the third type of the practice, which is variable and random practice. So in variable and random practice, it requires learners to repeat the same pattern but make small changes as necessary. So it is most effective during an autonomous stage and it increases the ability to adapt and generalize learning. So this type of practice is most closely related to the actual occupation, and short frequent practices is better than longer less frequent practice because it decreases fatigue and also increases reinforcement. So for example, for variable and random practice, a child for example is doing a random practice when he is working on grabs and release pattern, as he or she engage in a variety of play activities during the intervention. So the child, for example, might have to pick up and release toys as the play requires. So the therapist or parents can change the things that he need to grab and release, like use a small box, a rocks, swings, toys, or even a scooter board for them to hold. So this is kind of an example of variable and random practice that child can use to improve their motor skills in as a whole. Next, for fourth type of practice, which is mental practice. So mental practice is a type of practice which will be performed in skill in the imagination without any action involved. So it usually consists of role playing, watching a video, or imagining. So some child may be able to imagine movement after observing them on a video or seeing someone else perform the movement or the task that they have to do. so they might get more better idea on what they have to do or what they have to achieve. So for mental practice, it's also effective in teaching motor skill and retraining the timing and also coordination of the muscle group activity. Therapists also should incorporate actual performance shortly after the mental practice for best retention of the movement or the skill itself. And moreover, as therapists and also parents, um, both should be cautious when doing mental practice as to not incorporate them for too long, as this might be result in a lack of motivation for the children itself in learning new skills. So this is all type of practice and level that children can use in helping them in improving their motor skills. Now that we have done with practice level and time, we're going to see another concept or another techniques under motor learning, which is error-based learning. So under error-based learning, the children learn movement by making errors or mistake and self-correcting. Therapists and also parents must allow challenges to exceed child's capacity so that the child is given the opportunity to make errors, correct them if possible, and also learn from the experience. So children with disability especially must learn to adapt to new, different, and unexpected situations. And in error-based learning, making errors in control settings allow children to resolve problems and it's important for them to facilitate their motor skills learning. And it also very much encourage in error-based learning for the children to explore, to adjust their movement, and to evaluate their responses and reactions to help them learning and to refine their motor skills that they want to acquire or they want to achieve for better performance. Now next, the last concept of technique that we'll see today under the motor learning is called feedback. So as well know, feedback is something that is very important in a learning skill, new things. It's part of the therapy process itself. So in feedback, it have different type of feedback that may help the children to gain their skills or to learn their new skills better, to perform better as a whole. So type of feedback that it have is intrinsic feedback, extrinsic feedback, demonstrative feedback, knowledge of performance, knowledge of result, and also verbal feedback. So now we're going to see intrinsic feedback. So intrinsic feedback is allow child to self-correct and it is most effective for sustaining motor performance and should be the goal of intervention session. So intrinsic feedback usually may be elicited through the discovery and also in a situation in which the therapist set up the environment and the child is allowed to explore and discover, make errors and consequently learn new ways of moving. So that's type of intrinsic feedback. Going on to the extrinsic feedback, so children usually may require extrinsic feedback in the early stage of motor skill development. Extrinsic feedback consists of providing verbal cueing or physical guidance, and also it's a little bit different compared to demonstrative feedback, as demonstrative feedback refers to modeling and imitating movement. So in demonstrative feedback, it more refers to type of feedback that is best provided before the child actually practice the movement or the skill itself, as well as throughout the early stages of the skill acquisition. So it should not be given with verbal commentary because that will decrease the child's ability or attention on the movement itself. Now going to another aspect in the feedback, which is knowledge of performance. So knowledge of performance is feedback to improve the movement and is most helpful when it is specific and clear. So knowledge of performance help children understand how they perform the desired movement. So it is helpful in refining and also in adjusting motor skills, and therefore is useful for the child to establish basic skill that they have. So therapists or also parents may provide descriptive feedback to the child about the performance on the specific task, such as, for example, they are learning to use a pencil to write. So what parent can do is parent and also therapist can say that, wow, you done a great job. You have the pencil between your thumb, between your fingers, and you press it lightly. And you can continue by saying by giving feedback to them or improve their skill by saying, next time you have to press a little bit more. This, for example, on the type of knowledge of performance of type of feedback that you can use to improve their skill based on their knowledge of performance. So next, going on to the knowledge of a result. So knowledge of result, the feedback related to the desired outcome will usually help the children to understand the movement that they are trying to achieve. So under knowledge of result, providing this knowledge itself is very much effective when specific information or the movement goal is stated. So thus, for example, if the child is learning to do botany activity, so parents or therapists can say, wow, you did great job at in botany activity. You line up the button well. It is correct. You put in the button well. So it is more preferred than just saying good job to the child and they don't really understand what they have done well based on just their skills. So this knowledge of result is motivating and very much encouraging for children to continue as it is most helpful when learning new motor tasks so they know that what they have done, the result is correct and good. And going to the last one under the aspect of the feedback, which is verbal feedback. So, verbal feedback or verbal praise and reinforcement are useful in motivating the clients and also changing behavior but may be overused, especially in clinical setting. So verbal praise and reinforcement, such as saying "good job," "well done," "amazing," it allows children to make their own assessment on the things and also on the performance, which is beneficial and it will increase their sense of efficacy. So verbal feedback is best when it is provided immediately after completion of the task that they are doing. So using one or three brief few words that can be repeated easily by the performer is definitely the best, as I mentioned before, like good job, well done, amazing. So knowledge of correct performance also will motivate a child to continue practicing and so such that reinforcement may be used frequently. So positive feedback also with specific cues will improve performance of the child as a whole. Now next, the last concept of technique that we'll see today under the motor learning is called feedback. So as well know, feedback is something that is very important in a learning skill, new things. It's part of the therapy process itself. So in feedback, it have different type of feedback that may help children to gain their skills or to learn their new skills better, to perform better as a whole. So type of feedback that it have is intrinsic feedback, extrinsic feedback, demonstrative feedback, knowledge of performance, knowledge of result, and also verbal feedback. So now we're going to see intrinsic feedback. So intrinsic feedback is allow child to self-correct and it is most effective for sustaining motor performance and should be the goal of intervention session. So intrinsic feedback usually may be elicited through the discovery and also in a situation in which the therapist set up the environment and the child is allowed to explore and discover, make errors and consequently learn new ways of moving. So that's type of intrinsic feedback. Going on to the extrinsic feedback, so children usually may require extrinsic feedback in the early stage of motor skill development. Expressive feedback consists of providing verbal cueing or physical guidance, and also it's a little bit different compared to demonstrative feedback, as demonstrative feedback refers to modeling and imitating movement. So in demonstrative feedback, it more refers to type of feedback that is best provided before the child actually practice the movement or the skill itself, as well as throughout the early stages of the skill acquisition. So it should not be given with verbal commentary, because that will decrease the child's ability or attention on the movement itself. Now we are done with our topic today on motor learning. So this is a reference used for this topic, and I hope that everyone can use the point given. So I hope it will be beneficial for everyone, either it's parents or even therapists, to use the motor learning concept of technique mentioned before to improve the child's skills, especially in motor skills performance. And with that, thank you so much, everyone, and have a good day.